Andromedan is who I am, and Lyran. So Lyran, as you know, is they're the ancestors of Andromedans. And the thing that is very strong in Lyrans is because I've had images, and not images, dreams from the time that I was a child of being in alien warfare. They used to terrify me as a kid. And then I even had them in my 20s. I would have them so bad that my roommate, when I was in university, she'd find me huddled up in the corner of my bedroom, because these dreams were that terrifying. They were so real. And my heritage, what I've been able to pick out from just exploring my soul lineage, my past lives, my in-between lives, and my galactic lineage, is that I am a warrior. I have been a freedom fighter, a resistance fighter. I was the same, and I actually had a World War II life. I went to that life, my life previous to this. I was captured by the Nazis and tortured. And so I've got this continuous heritage of being a warrior.
So hello and welcome to Cosmic Conversations, the podcast where we dive deep into the multi-dimensional mysteries of the universe and explore how they guide us to live authentic, empowered lives. I'm Hayden Crawford, and I'm a soul guide specializing in colour therapy and numerology. And today's episode is one that promises to break boundaries, challenge taboos, and inspire deep healing. Our guest, Cindy Woodland, is a gifted intuitive and healer, a heavy metal musician, and a passionate advocate for self-actualization and self-love. She brings a wealth of wisdom, drawing from her Andromedan Starseed lineage and her experiences as a trauma survivor. Her mission is to empower others to access their intuition, embrace their authentic selves, and heal deeply. Cindy, welcome to Cosmic Conversations.
Absolutely. Thanks, Hayden. I really appreciate this opportunity to talk about this. Thank you.
Wonderful. Now, you have selected the title of today's podcast, and you've been working on it actually for a while. And you mentioned that you'd like it to be called Reclaim Your Sovereign Power and Know Your Spiritual Self to Transmute Trauma and Thrive. So can you explain why you've chosen to title it in this way?
So yes, it is morphed from, when we first started thinking about this a few months ago, and it's because of the political climate. It's pretty terrifying for many people. So the concept of sovereign power in these times, I think, are more important than they've been in decades. So reclaiming your sovereign power, by reclaiming it means you already have it. It's within you. It's just that we've been so conditioned not to believe that we don't have that kind of ultimate power. So sovereign, of course, is usually reserved for the context of monarchy, kings, queens, and others now. The whole point there is that sovereign means that it is the highest authority. Sovereign is the highest authority, and it is your power. It is you. You have the highest authority in your life for making your life what you want to be. And it's unraveling all the conditioning that all of us have been exposed to over our lifetime to believe that we're not sovereign, that somebody else has to make the decisions for us, which of course is natural when you're a young child and you need the guidance of your parents. But that has to unfold as you grow. So, and then the last part about knowing your spiritual self. So that is based on the fact that we have lived eternally. And with each incarnation, each experience, whether it's in human form or in a galactic form, interdimensionally, we gain incredible experiences. We expand who we are as an individual entity. And so by tapping into your spiritual self, you are tapping into this wealth of wisdom and experience that you can then bring into this life. And then you can use that. So, as far as trauma goes, everybody experiences trauma. Everybody experiences in one way or another, some more severe than others. But by tapping into your spiritual self, then you are able to access the information, the confidence, the power, like so many things, to be able to take your personal trauma and transmute it, transform it, so that you're not just surviving trauma and getting out of victimhood, you're actually thriving. You've expanded, you're even more so as an individual than you were prior to the trauma. So it's not succumbing or being defeated by the trauma, it's using it like an incredible fodder for your own growth.
Amazing. I absolutely love that. And so well explained. Thank you so much for bringing clarity onto your title. It's absolutely fantastic. So just to shift the focus then slightly, could you tell us a bit more about how your focus on self-actualization has dominated your life and the roles that intuition and spirituality have played?
So yeah, I was really fortunate in my family. I was encouraged to believe in my intuitive abilities. Back then, they were called psychic abilities or ESP. So my parents never tried to suppress it. So I was free. I was free to just let it evolve. And the my main strength that way as a child was precognitive dreams. I had many dreams that were always coming true, and then when I was in my teens, I had this epiphany, an experience, and it's really hard to put it into words. But the message that I got was that reality is in the mind of the beholder. Now that seems trite. We've all heard that, but and when I had that message, it was downloaded. It was like, yeah, whatever. Because as a teenager, I just thought it was dumb. I didn't know what the meaning of it was. But that was when I was 17. That epiphany actually has guided me throughout my life. That it's always going back to yourself about how you perceive things, that reality is in the mind of the beholder. Like, yeah, there can be a lot of nasty stuff happening outside of you, but again, everybody's different with how they deal with it. So then when I was 19, I decided that I would do my psychology degree in university. And that was where I first heard the concept of self-actualization, Carl Jung's self-actualization. And the two psychologists that I really connected with when I was doing my psychology degree was Maslow's hierarchy of needs, and Carl Jung, and self-actualization. So the way that I saw self-actualization at that time, the way that it was presented was in the metaphor of the iceberg, where you've got 90% of the iceberg under the ocean and only 10% is above it. So that is a metaphor for the mind. And later on, I came to understand it like your totality. It's not just your mind, but your totality of who you are. And I just became obsessed with tapping into that underlying hidden part so that I could just experience life as fully as I possibly could. So that again has been driving me my whole life, and that really propelled me in the spiritual direction. I started practicing Buddhism when I was in my 20s, and the reason why was because it was so attractive to me. Was again, it was that concept of being the Buddha, like really becoming your whole totality. And so that for me, that self-actualization and the obsession that I had with it is what launched me into my spiritual practice, because I just thought the physical being, just science and everything. So I work in the field of science. I'm a regulatory toxicologist in the public sector. So science is great. I love science, but there's so much more. And that's what I really wanted to explore. I just wanted the totality. I wanted everything. And so that's what I've been doing ever since. And it's just been this incredible unfolding over my lifetime.
Wow, that's amazing. And how did you learn to access then your past lives? And what was their significance in supporting child trauma survivors in this life?
So, because Buddhism introduced me to the concept of reincarnation, because I was raised Christian, and then once I started practicing Buddhism, my mind opened up. And then reading books like Shirley MacLaine's Out on a Limb in the 80s, that also expanded my consciousness that way. And so I the the concept of reincarnation, I wasn't really interested in the beginning when I started practicing Buddhism. I was just interested in tapping my full potential. And then I also loved the idea that it was truly egalitarian, that it was based on the equality of all life, upholding the dignity of every individual. So that was also very, very dear to me. But I didn't get interested in the reincarnation aspect of it until about almost 20 years after I started practicing Buddhism. And it didn't, and friends of mine who were Buddhists as well had encouraged me to do past life regressions, but it just wasn't appealing to me until I was up against the wall. Like with most people, you really don't try the truly alternative and what people consider woohoo until you are up against the wall and conventional things just aren't working for you. So that's what I did. And I started my first regression in 2010. I connected with Brian Weiss. For people who aren't familiar with him, you can find lots online about him. But for me, he's the past life guru. I've seen him 3 times personally. I took training with him to do past life regression therapies. But the very first regression that I did was in 2010, and that what prompted me to explore past lives was at that time I was going through menopause, and menopause, you can have serious sleep deprivation. I was doing very long commutes to work, like 270 kilometers a day, so 4 hours of driving approximately. And because I was having severe sleep deprivation and insomnia, I was starting to fall asleep at the wheel. So it became life threatening. So, and nothing was working like in being able to sleep. And I didn't want to rely on medication because as a toxicologist, I know that you can have effects that you don't want in taking any kind of medication. So what I did was, it was suggested by Sonia Choquette that when you do a past life regression, that you write down, if you have a specific question, you write it down on a piece of paper, and then you do the regression. So I wrote down the question on a piece of paper. It was, why can't I sleep? And then the regression that I used was one that Brian Weiss had on YouTube. It was only about 20 minutes long. And it was the very first time I ever did it. And I had immediate success. And I went to a past life, and the past life took me to the year 1878. And all I could see in front of me was that I was a man and that I was by a campfire. And I was very tall. I had long legs stretched out in front of me. And what was really interesting, the cowboy boots that I had on in this image were cowboy boots. They're my favorite cowboy boots today. There's obviously they're not the same, but same style, square toed, very, very cowboyish. So anyway, so in that dream, or in that regression, um, I um, I was by a campfire and I was trying to stay awake. And then all of a sudden I started nodding off and I went, no, I have to stay awake. And so I came out of that regression. And that's the thing with past life regressions, at least for me. Some people, it plays out like a full movie. For me, it's just little snippets. Like I had to do repeated regressions to keep going back and getting more and more information about that particular life. So what ended up happening, and the reason why I was interested in doing past life regressions, it wasn't to find out if I was somebody famous or anything like that. It was I had real life problems in this life that I needed to solve. And that's what I wanted it for. And that's something that Brian Weiss has always emphasized too. It's for the therapeutic aspect of it, of the application that you can have in your current incarnation. So what was cool was that I came out of that regression, and that was the first night I slept straight through for 6.5 hours. 6.5 hours doesn't seem long, but at that time it was gold. And so that's what got me hooked on it. And since then, I've gone back to 17 past lives. And it got to the point where and it happened so easily for me. And I think it's not that I'm special or anything, it's just I'm open. I'm trusting, I'm open, and so it happens. And so the many lives that I've gone back to since then, that life turned out to be not as pivotal as other lives were. The theme that I've had in going back to this throughout the 17 lives that I've gone to, and I could have gone through to more, but it was just it got to a point where it's like, okay, I've done the past life part. I want to move on to something else. And so then I went into like in between lives, and I've been doing interdimensional. But the point that I want to make about the past lives that I went through, what was so valuable about it was that it gave me such clear answers of why I am so obsessed with certain things in this lifetime. And probably the most defining obsession that I have is this: I'm so devoted to ending child trauma, child sexual trauma, child sex trafficking. Prior to working as a regulatory toxicologist in chemical risk assessment in the Canadian government, I worked in another part of the public sector in child protection services. And that was back in the 80s. And I worked with children that were physically and sexually abused and trafficked. At that time, we didn't call it trafficking. It was called child prostitution, but they were trafficked. And it has never left me. The only reason I left that job was because I couldn't deal with the hierarchy in the government. I could not abide by the decisions that were being made for the kids because it was not in the highest good of the kids. And which is another thing, like being resistant or nonconformist and not hierarchical in my approach to life is something that I also picked up repeatedly from my past lives. And I was actually publicly executed in a number of lives for being non-hierarchical and trying to raise the awareness of protection of children, going back as far as the 1600s in trying to protect children. And then as a monk in Mexico, in the actually, I never got a date for that one. I think it was around the 1700s. But anyway, these were indigenous children that were in an orphanage, and I was a monk, and I was trying to teach them to read and write. And I was told by it was a Catholic orphanage in Mexico. I was Spanish, and I'd come there to work in the orphanage, and I was teaching these children to read and write. But the local landowners did not want that. They wanted these children to basically be their slaves, to be forced labor. And so I was told to stop teaching them, to start educating them. And then they hung me in front of the children. And that was an experience and what's interesting is that I was told about that life by two different psychics in the early 80s. And then again, they were both in the 80s, early and then later 80s. They told me about this life and that it was a really important life. And it was only when I started going into my own past lives that I found how critical that life was. And even to this day, I can cry so easily thinking about that life because the children were forced to watch me being hung so that they would be so terrified of standing up in any way for their own sovereign power. So that's why today, with everything that's going on, I feel so motivated doesn't even cut it, but so devoted, um, to not letting us slip back, to not letting our society regress in any way towards a type of enslavement that could easily happen given all the changes that are happening right now. So for anybody who is thinking about doing their own past life regressions, it's really easy. It's like, some people will say that it's really difficult. You got to go through these really difficult regressions, but I would the philosophy or the approach that I take with everything now is keep it simple. Keep it simple. And then if it doesn't work that way, then you explore. Everybody's different. You've got your own way of doing it. But because I approached the past life regressions like a little kid, just curious and thinking, well, it can't be difficult. It turned out to be like that. So yeah, I encourage people to really try that out, because it's really given me direction and explanations for things in my life that I really needed.
Amazing. Absolutely. I follow that principle myself, actually. Keep things simple, stupid. It's the KISS principle, isn't it? And it always works much better when you don't overcomplicate things. So what role has music then played for you, particularly heavy metal music, in your soul's evolution in this life?
Yes. So yeah, I was always attracted, as far back as I can remember, to hard rock, heavy metal. Uh, my first albums that I bought when I was like 11, 12, 13 years old were Black Sabbath, Led Zeppelin. I was into Deep Purple. Uh, and then it really, and of course I continued with that. I really went to many concerts, and it was like heaven. If like everybody's got their definition of heaven. For me, heaven is heavy metal music and dancing and being in that whole world, that realm of hard rock and blues and some grunge music. But to use just one term, I guess heavy metal is a good umbrella. So what ended up happening was, when I got married and had my children, I put the music on. I abandoned it. I abandoned it while I was married and had my children. And then when it was about 10 years into my marriage, I almost died. I had a botched surgery, and the surgery left me with acute pancreatitis. And so it was, for the next 2 years, it was like trying to figure out how to live with this. And I was told to get my affairs in order, because there was nothing they could do for me, because I had a leaky pancreatic duct. And anyway, it's very serious. So when this pancreatic surgeon told me there was nothing that they could do for me, um, I walked out of that office, and I've never gone back for medical consultation, because I had my younger son was only 6 months old when this happened, and my older son was 5 years old. And there was just, for me, the fighter in me kicked in, and I just said, there's no bloody way that I'm leaving my kids. So it was really funny, because I got off. I ended up having a nutritionist assigned to me to work with me on my diet, and she called me at my office, and she was really sweet. She was very kind and very compassionate compared to the doctors that I had to deal with. And she just was very blunt with me. And she said, do you realize that you're going to die? Because she didn't think I was taking it seriously. She said, you're going to die from this if you don't find a way, to get over this and keep living and to take care of your children. So I got off the phone with her, and I started to cry. But it was really funny. I had such clarity. It was like I knew I wasn't crying because I was going to leave my children. I knew my children were well loved. They would be well taken care of in my family and by my ex-husband. And then it was like, well, why am I crying? I just had this deep knowing that there was something else. And so a friend of mine walked. So actually, yeah, before he came in. So then I realized the reason why I was crying was because I did not want to leave this life without becoming happy. it was like a huge epiphany of how unhappy I was in my life. And I knew that I had to become happy before I died. So, so then, and of course, that's emphasized by my Buddhist leaders at the time. They were always saying that the state of life that you're in when you die is what you're going to carry over in your next life. So you want to make sure you're having a good time because that's what you want to bring with you when you die. So anyway, then a friend of mine who I worked with, he came in and he was consoling me and he said, "So what are you going to do?" And I remember he was kind of leaning over me. I had my head in my hands and I was leaning down on my desk. And I looked up at him and I said, "I'm going to form a band." And he said, "Are you crazy?" It just seemed so wild to say that. And he and I formed a band. He was the guitarist, and I was a blossoming guitarist at the time. He was the lead guitarist. And we had the band together for a few months, but then it fell apart because then I moved to another job and it just fell apart. But that was 20 years ago. And I've been on that path ever since. And the thing that was really interesting is that I'll just share one experience regarding what the role of the music is in my spiritual journey is that I was laying in bed one day and it was a really, really bad time because my marriage had split up and I wasn't able to take care of my kids. They were with their dad and I was alone in my house and I had an old house that I bought and I wasn't able to work at that time. I had a very supportive boss at that time who allowed me to take what I needed to deal with the pancreatitis and still keep working. So I was laying in bed one day though, and pancreatitis is excruciatingly painful. And I was laying in bed one day and I just thought, I can't do this. I can't survive this pain. And all of a sudden, I got this download, a message, and it said, "Go downstairs, turn on the stereo, and put on The Cult." So for anybody who doesn't know who The Cult is a goth rock band from the late 80s and 90s. And so I went downstairs and I put on one of their songs. I can't remember which one it was, but I did, and the pain vanished. It completely went away. So that again opened another door into exploring the power of music. And music for me is very spiritual. It's all about vibration. And my guitar god is Jimi Hendrix. And Jimi Hendrix was of the same mind too, that he's famous for a lot of really cool quotes about the power of music. So that has kept me on track. So music it's been my savior. It really has been my savior in so many ways. And when I start to not just get physically in pain, emotional pain, I will just put on the music that resonates with me. And for me, it's music that would not resonate for others. Like, you hear this stuff about how heavy metal is the one type of music that's not very spiritual. And it's like, no, that's not really true. And I just have to put a shout out for one young artist today whose music really resonates with me, and that's Taylor Momsen's. And her song "Take Me Down," and just as I say it, I get shivers. It just elevates me. So the thing that's cool about music is that it's really personal. It's very personal, and only you know what music supports you and what doesn't support you. Like one thing that happens to me is that if I walk into a store and I hear country music, I actually get physically ill. It's the opposite. So it's not to say anything bad about country music. It's just whatever you personally resonate with. And the information that's been available on music is therapy, like music therapy. That's one thing that's really clearly said, is that it's very personal classical will work for some people, blues, it doesn't matter. You've got to figure it out. And another kind of shout out for anybody who's really interested in this, there is a movie that was done about 10 years ago, and I think it's called Alive Inside. And it's about this guy who went into seniors' homes, old folks' homes, and used music. He put on Walkmans, like, so yeah, this was done a while ago, and see how it affected their dementia. And there was this one old guy, Henry, and again, I'm getting shivers as I talk about it. They put on some old classic blues, and Henry hadn't budged. Like, he had remained in this hunched posture for quite a few years. They put the music on for him, the blues, and he literally came alive. It was just so powerful. So that's what music means for me. It's highly spiritual. And if somebody, I really don't believe that when people say, "Oh, I'm not into music," I don't believe it. It's just you haven't found your music, what is good for you. So
That's amazing, Cindy. I absolutely love hearing that. So you're so unique in so many different ways. And, having this really strong alignment with heavy metal music is something that you are hoping to continue into the future as well, isn't
oh
it?
yeah, yeah, got my whole setup here, got my whole band set up, just waiting for the right musicians to come in.
Amazing. So what does remembrance and interdimensionality mean for you? And how has it helped to clarify your true soul purpose?
So remembrance really took on significance just in the last year, like in working with you, and remembering, because this year it just exploded. So the first part of the remembering is going through the past lives. Then I've done in between lives. Robert Schwartz, for people who aren't familiar with Robert Schwartz, he's got videos too on YouTube. He specializes in between lives, and in between lives, that's where we work out our pre-birth plans. So again, that was highly informative and helpful for me in just figuring out the chaos in my own life at times. And then this year, where it really took off was, which is how I contacted you. Yeah, like tapping into my Andromedan heritage. And I was never particularly interested in ETs or the galactic scene. But this year, so 2 years ago, I started having, I don't know what you would call them. I call them spaceships, UAPs. They have been coming repeatedly. I live in the country, and they will come out and they hover above the cornfield, and I get like a front row seat. I've got this long, big window, and they literally line up in front of this window, and so that started happening 2 years ago. Yeah, January 2023. And it happened so much. It was regular, and they would go up and down. And there was no way that these were planes, because the movement was just not planes. They would just sit there, they'd hover, they'd have different lights. There'd be, anyway, without going into all the details about that, that again opened me up in another way, and remembering galactic heritage, my galactic heritage. And the thing is, what happened with the ships is they were like every night for 3 months. And then I was trying to convince my family members about it, and they thought I was nuts. Even my one son, who was pretty open to this stuff, they thought I was nuts. And I just got so angry and frustrated with it. And I sort of said to the ships, I said, this isn't worth it. If you're not going to like show yourself to everybody else, I don't want to see you anymore. I got angry. They went away. They went away, and they didn't come back for a year and a half. And then I started opening up to friends of mine about it. And they're a couple, and the husband has been following this and was really open to it. And it was so interesting, because the night that I was at their place and was talking with them about it, as I went back to my house, there was one right outside their place, and it followed me all the way to my house. And so I'm texting and calling my friends and telling them what's happening. But it was just the synchronicity of it that, that it came back at that time. So they've been back now. They're out, like there was one out there tonight. And so what that did was it opened me up again. It's like peeling off another layer of my totality to get me to be open, because as a scientist, I've got this woohoo thing that's still kind of lingering in me. And so that really cracked me open to exploring the galaxy, like galactic heritage. And so that's when I went online and was searching, I came across your video on Andromedans and looked at the 12 traits. And I just thought, yeah, yeah, this is definitely me. And people can say, well, you could easily line up with a number of traits. Well, no, because I've looked at so many different star seeds, and Andromedan is who I am, and Lyran. So Lyran, as you know, is they're the ancestors of Andromedans. And the thing that is very strong in Lyrans is they, because I've had images, like, and not images, dreams from the time that I was a child of being in alien warfare. They used to terrify me as a kid. And then I even had them in my 20s. I would have them so bad that my roommate, when I was in university, she'd find me huddled up in the corner of my room, my bedroom, because these dreams were that terrifying. They were so real. And so yeah, my heritage, what I've been able to pick out from just exploring my soul lineage, my past lives, my in between lives, and my galactic lineage, is that I am a warrior. I have been a freedom fighter, a resistance fighter. I was the same, and I actually had a World War II life. I went to that life, my life previous to this. I was captured by the Nazis and tortured. And so I've got this continuous heritage of being a warrior. I was also a centurion. I was a Roman centurion. So, like, I've got this very powerful energy of being a warrior. And I'm a natural for archery. Like, and and I've had, like, I can easily wield a sword. So, like, all these things that I would have had to have done in these previous incarnations, they come very naturally to me now. And this is another thing that Brian Weiss always emphasizes: whatever particular skill or talent you have in this life was likely developed in a previous life. So this is what I'm saying. Like, when I was talking originally about self-actualization and tapping into your totality, this is a good example of it. And so then you think, well, why, what possible value can you have from being a warrior? Well, the value of freedom, and that it's worth fighting for. And because you've seen the carnage, because I did have another life where I went back to, and this was also another life that was predicted by psychics 20 and 30 years prior to me actually accessing this life. I was in another battle. It was in the 1400s. And that was the life in which it finally dawned on me that warfare has such a huge cost that we have to find other ways. Because I was a general. I was actually a Spanish general in that war. And I had this epiphany in this war field with all this carnage and dead bodies around me. And I had just finished slaying a 14-year-old blonde boy. And when I finally sat down and realized what I'd done, that was the life in which I swore off war and decided that I was going to devote the rest of my existence to finding ways to ensure the freedom of all people and peace and harmony. So going back to remembering all of that, and being able to take it like almost like a complete data set, like the scientist in me is like, okay, you don't really know, you can't make a conclusion until you've collected all of your data, and then you can fit it together. And that's the way I see all these experiences, is like the conclusion that I make from this is that there is nothing more valuable than freedom. And people will say, well, isn't love more valuable? And I can only say that when I ask myself what is most important to me, it's freedom. It's freedom. And that's why, like, the title of this podcast, Sovereign Power, is perfect, because it's all about realizing, reclaiming that you are the greatest authority in your life, and you have to reclaim your power so that you can be totally free. So that's where and then there's the fun stuff too, like, there's a lot of fun stuff in being Andromedan, but which I carried over into this life too. But and then the music is also a huge part of my lineage. So when you remember your totality, you're working with a full data set. That's the only way I can describe it.
Absolutely. And freedom, being the dominant trait of the Andromedan starseed. So I understand that really well, because my main galactic connection as well is Andromedan, although, we are multi-dimensional, ancient immortal beings of light living out temporary human experiences. The aspect of the Andromedan traits really resonates with me as well. It was something that I also received. It was about 8 years ago, and I just got the word Andromeda in the middle of the night, and I had no idea what it even meant. I thought it was something connected with Star Trek or Star Wars, and I Googled it the next day, and then I started researching the Andromedans, and over a period of time, I put together that video that you saw, and that's what connected us. But it's completely shifted the trajectory of my life, identifying
I know.
predominantly with the Andromedan lineage. Um, and my soul actually comes in from the Andromeda constellation, not the galaxy. My belief is that I come from a little planet around the star Mirage in the Andromeda constellation. But I also, like you, with you and your Lyran connection, I have a connection with Arcturus and the
Mm,
Pleiades as well, but it is predominantly the freedom aspect of the Andromedan
yeah.
lineage that's so important to me. And you can just see how that's played itself out ever since I left home. I've never lived in one country for too long, and I'm a creative nomad, which are the dominant traits of the Andromedan starseed. So thank you for being open about that, because I'm sure a lot of viewers watching are going to be also self-identifying with certain galactic races and awakening to their galactic origins. So, how do we then access our personal power on a daily basis, then, Cindy, so that we can denormalize trauma and instead normalize happiness and thriving as a new societal paradigm, especially now that we're facing serious threats to freedom and democracy?
Yeah. So the number one thing um, is trust yourself. Because again, it's just like the music, it's so personal. Like, um, there are many spiritual practices that I tried out that simply didn't work for me. It worked for others, but not for me. So you can gain, information, listening to different people online. As in, watching your Andromedan video was really helpful for me. But it's like, if you're not like this, you have to learn to be like this, in that you are number one. You are the highest authority in your life. So you have to learn to trust that. And the hardest time is when it goes against what everybody else is telling you. And depending on your dynamic in your family, work, friend situation, um, it's work. It takes work to be able to put yourself as your number one authority and trust yourself. I had some very clear examples in my life where I handed over my power to other people, and it was disastrous. They were decisions that were life altering. And so, what was fortunate about that is I will never do that again, ever. So, that is the number one thing, is to learn to trust yourself. And the best way to do that, and there's lots on this out there, it's about when you get quiet, when you meditate, and some people get into meditation and some can't. It's Don't worry about how you do it. It's just getting into a state, whether it's just being at the kitchen sink washing dishes, going out for a run, something that is mindless, something that does not engage your monkey brain. And by monkey brain, I'm sure a lot of us know what that means, where you're just going on and on and on and on and ruminating over stuff. You have to quiet it. And the reason why you have to quiet it is because that's when you can hear your intuition, your higher self, your inner being. Like it's called different things by different people, but you will hear it. And there is a quiet that comes with it. And when you get a message that is anxious or fearful, that's not your intuition. So that, and again, like, there's lots of, you can try out different people online, because there's many people explain this in their own ways. But it's basically, if you've got a fearful or an angry or anxious feeling while you're trying to listen to yourself, that's not the time to do it. It's only when you're like just quiet. And I get, like, the more that I've done this, I actually get a feeling of bliss. And I know when I get that bliss, it's good to go. And I'll ask my question. I use a lot of tools right now. And one of them that still kind of freaks me out, but it absolutely works, is dowsing. So dowsing is when you got a pendulum and you swing it, and you decide yourself which direction of swing means, yes or no. Anyway, I've gotten so good at it and so confident with it that I actually will get words spelt out for me. So I'll ask a question and the word will, so I drew a grid, like with the alphabet, like a chart, and you can buy them too. You don't have to just draw it out yourself. But anyway, the whole point in all of this is you have to trust it. And what I always go back to is, like, it's not going to hurt anything. Like I said, I've had catastrophes happen out of other people deciding for me. But when I decide myself, it's good. Like, it might be a rough road, but it works out, and it's my decision, and it empowers me. It's my freedom. So as far as daily things go, so yeah, you trust yourself, and absolutely top priority is, what's the word? Not woo woo. Anyway, self-love. Like, it's so stupid in our society. Like, what the hell is wrong with prioritizing self-love? Why does that have to be considered Pollyanna? I mean, it's like, the more that I've done this, that's insane. That's absolutely insane. Would you want your child to have self-love? So if you want your child to have self-love, why don't you want it for yourself? Especially when you have self-love, you're such a nice person. You're so much nicer than when you're not loving yourself. So those two things, trusting yourself, finding your own way to tap into your higher self, your intuition, and let that guide you. And then self-love. And the way to do self-love that I found, and that came out of COVID, like with everybody having had to really adjust during COVID for self-care, it was finally being forced to do self-care that I learned to really love myself. Because the way that I interpret that is that when you're really doing self-care, you're sending a huge, powerful message to your subconscious that you love yourself. So it's like you don't even have to work at self-love. As long as you're going through the motions of self-care, that's how it starts. And so self-care is just like, I do the things that give me joy. And I know it's going to shock some people, but I actually really like doing laundry and ironing now that I'm just doing it for myself. So because I'm by myself now, but I love it, and I get such a good feeling out of it. And it's because, yeah, then I get to have nice clothes to wear and dress up the way that I want to. um, and then making nice meals for myself. And again, it's really funny now that I'm by myself. I'm really putting a lot of effort into feeding myself, to taking care of myself. And when I make a nice meal for myself that's healthy, it feels great. So learning to self-love, I start with self-care, and self-care is just what are the little things that perk you up that you want to do. And you can figure it out because you get that feeling. It's like, no, I don't feel like doing my taxes. I mean, you got to do your taxes at some point. But yeah, I'd like to just sit down and binge on watching my show is Only Murders in the Building. I love that show. So just doing little things like that. And so in that sense, then going back to the more serious part, well, self-love is serious, no, but the more heavy stuff about the last part of your question about in these times. Um, for myself, because I'm so on top of the news right now, because I'm looking for any glimmer of hope for seeing people rise up. And there's some really cool stuff, like Bernie Sanders is just amazing with what he's doing. Um, so again, it's listening to myself. It's like, okay, I get a bit of the news, then I will do, actually, like, I do brain exercises just to get me to take my mind off of everything. Then I'll meditate, then I'll do dowsing, I even do divination. But it's like finding your own rhythm, but in prioritizing your self-love, self-care, that is the best way to make sure that we've all got democracy and freedom, because then you're going to have that fight in you that will not allow anybody to enslave you in any way. So I think that's it.
Words of wisdom, Cindy, words of wisdom. And if you ever feel like you want to do my laundry and ironing, I'm more than happy to hire you. So, where can people get in contact with you, Cindy?
Oh, I did not put my email out. I don't know. Yeah, I didn't think that went through.
Would
Because
you
I don't
like
have a
me
website.
to drop some details in the information underneath the video where people can contact you if they feel that they would like to reach out and have a conversation with you? Would you be happy with that?
Absolutely. That'd be wonderful. That'd be great. Yeah. Yeah. Because for sure I'd love to connect with people. I really would. And I didn't figure that one out beforehand. Sorry.
That's all
But
right,
no,
because I
that's
know that,
perfect. That works.
well,
Yeah.
during the conversations that we've been having, over the months, um, one of your goals is to reform a heavy metal band, and you are specifically hoping for a guitarist to come in, aren't
Yeah.
you? So
Yeah.
if there is a guitarist out there that, feels attracted to Cindy's energy, then would you be happy for them to reach out and contact you?
Oh, totally. Yeah. That'd be very cool.
I
Yeah.
think so too. Wonderful. Well, listen, thank you so much for all of that valuable information today, Cindy. It's been incredible, right? Fantastic. I think people are going to get a lot from what you've said today, and it's going to help them to step more into thriving. And if you loved what you heard today and the episode has resonated with you, please don't forget to like and subscribe and to make a comment as well in the video. We'd be really interested to get your feedback and any thoughts that you have on what we've spoken about today. And also, um, I'd be genuinely grateful as well if you can share this video with people that you love in your life that feel would benefit from the wisdom that Cindy has shared with us today as well. So thank you very, very much for tuning in. And we will see you next time on Cosmic Conversations. Thank you again, Cindy.
And thank you, Hayden. Thank you so much.
Bye for now.